So in February of 2004, I got up this one morning and it was foggy, and I mean foggy. I walked out of my cell and I couldn't see down the ward. It was that thick and it was so bitterly cold. Anyway, I had to walk around to the hospital ward to see Mick. And when I got there was a fire. Barra cell, being 12 cell, they'd got together, somebody had got a saw from somewhere, chopped up a small tree and made a fire outside the cells. And there was probably about a dozen people sat round this fire. So I squeezed in with them. Oh man, it was lovely, that's all I can say. Just to feel warmth come into you for like the first time. It was unbelievable for me. And, you know, things that we take for granted, we shouldn't. That's all I can say. Anyway, we were having a little smoke on a biddy, and then the head sab turned up. He didn't say anything about anybody smoking. This guy was knocking on, he didn't care, but he said, put out fire. And everybody was complaining, blah, 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 and he wouldn't have it, so the fire was put out, and that was the end of that. Anyway, come March, the temperature had started to change, and it was starting to get warm again, and I hadn't washed for 3 months. And the strange thing is, I didn't smell. Honestly, I washed me bits now and then, and that was an effort. But basically, I didn't wash for 3 months, and I slept in my clothes day and night. A guy got me a balaclava, one of the old-fashioned ones, you know, that like terrorists use now. And I wore this balaclava basically for months. You know, I take it off now and then just to have a scratch or something, but otherwise I slept and I walked round with this balaclava. Anyway, it goes round to see Mick this day, and he tells me that Chris, the Frenchman, Chris Delias, I got transferred to CJ2, which is a convict ward. And I said, why? You know, this guy's an angel, man. I said, why would they send him there when he was doing so much good? He said that was the problem. He said the AS, the assistant superintendent of the hospital, didn't like him. For the simple reason he was always helping people. So he packed him off to CJ2. That was the mentality in Tihar. I have to say it devastated me. Like, from the time I was recuperating with pneumonia and I was in the hospital, Chris and we got quite close. And this guy, he's a true spiritual master, guru, whatever you want to call him. I've never ever come across a guy like this. And he spoke to me in ways that I understood but hadn't realized. And I'll be honest, at the time I still didn't get the realization, but what he was saying was sinking in, just generally talking about life. And this was to become more fruitful in the autumn of 2005. Anyway, I hadn't had a smoke for about a week, and God, I was pissed, you know. I was sad, angry, frustrated, not being able to communicate outside of Tihar. And it just dragged me down. And this is how my life was going on, you know. It went on like that for two and a bit years. This carried on like that. And it was something I couldn't get out of. You know, I'd wake up one day and I'd be feeling good. Next day, I'd feel like shit. Something would just drag me down. And to be honest, 90% of it was my wife, and I've mentioned this in the past, so I'm not going to go on about it, but that's how it was. And anyway, I went to Mixel this day, and we were having a smoke, and all of a sudden there was a commotion outside, and this convict called me outside of Mixel. So I walked out, and there was the assistant superintendent of the hospital. He was a nasty bastard. He was evil, this guy. He brought all his lackeys, and they searched every cell in Baracel, trashed them all. I was searched. I didn't have nothing on me. I hadn't had no money for about 6 weeks. I had no tobacco, no nothing, you know. And anyway, they found one guy. I'm not going to give his name, it's not worth it. He was Indian. And this guy was a bastard, that's all I can say. Anyway, they found smack on him. So the AS decided to beat him with a lathie stick. Beat him on his back, on the backs of his legs. Beat him till he could hardly stand. And threw him in his cell and locked him up for the rest of the day. And I said to Mick, I said, that was a bit harsh, like. He said, yeah, it was, Steve, because this guy was paying the AS to let him smoke and deal in smack. And that's how it was. It was crazy. Anyway, after it was all over and they disappeared, Rick produced some tobacco, some charas, and we got stoned in his cell. And it was a nice ending for my day, if you like. Anyway, not long after that, a few days later, I decided to have a shave. Now, in Tihar, they had shavers. These were men that would come round to each ward once or twice a week and shave people. And they used cutthroat razors, but with the old-fashioned double-edged razor blade that they would snap in half and fit it into the blade part, and they'd shave you with it. If you give them a 10 rupee coupon, you could get soap. If you had no money, you'd have water. And of course, I never had no water. And I hadn't had a shave for about 4 months, so I was looking a bit scruffy, to say the least. Anyway, I rubbed water over my face, got in the queue, and eventually got this shave. And Mick had a mirror. And when I looked at my face, I thought, wow, you know, you don't look too bad. It wasn't long before that. I was at the OPD for something, some tablets, and I jumped on the scales and I weighed myself up. And I was around about 60 kilos. So I'd lost maybe 25 kilos by this time. And considering that, I was looking good. So I thought, I'm going to try and keep myself clean shaven for a while. Hadn't washed my hair for over 3 months. Christ knows what I looked like, to be honest. But anyway, not long after that, I was back in court. The usual bullshit story, you know, queue up, gets into the lockup. And this day when I went there, it was packed tight. There must have been nearly 100 of us in this one lockup. Couldn't sit down, simple as that. There was no room to sit down. And I was waiting for my charges to be framed. Now I got my charge sheet, but then they have to frame the charges. And I went this day expecting that the charges would be framed. Got to court, and I was told that the charges had been framed. And to this day, I still don't know what they were. Because they never told me, never give me no paperwork, nada, nothing at all. And then they give me a 3-month date. And this is how it was, you know. And just think about it. You're on under trial. You've been there for nearly a year. And you have a 3-month date, you know. So for 3 months, you know nothing is going to happen. Absolutely nothing. Anyway, to carry on, went round to see Mick this day, and he was packing up all his stuff. I said, what are you doing? He said, I've been transferred to Central Jail number 4. I said, why? I said, you know, this is the HIV ward, Baracel, even though there were non-HIV people living there because they paid money like. He was the only one being sent to CJ4. And I found out much later that the reason for this was that he pissed off the AS because he put a complaint in about something or other. And Mick told me years later he'd put in probably 2,000 complaints over his time in Tihar. Anyway, they shoved him off to CJ4. And that night when I went back to my cell, I was in shock. These were like the only 2 people since I'd been transferred to CJ4 the previous August that I would call friends, you know. I was very close to the pair of them, and now they're gone. So for like 3 weeks, I never left the convict ward, never had a smoke. Just wallowed in my own self-pity, if you like, for want of a better word. And then one day, I went round to the hospital to see this Englishman, Bob, the one that pleaded guilty for drug trafficking. And he said, Steve, there's going to be a drama. I said, oh yeah. He said, yeah. He said, a bit later on today, like. I said, oh, okay. Anyway, what transpired was he wanted a bed. You know, he wanted a proper bed. Even though he was living in the hospital ward, the cells, there's no beds, of course, it was just concrete. So he took a load of tablets, took an overdose, planned overdose. They sent him to the outside hospital, kept him there maybe 1 or 2 days, sent him back, and put him into the psycho ward. And he was so happy because he had a bed, a real bed, you know. So I goes round to see him this day, and as it turned out, he had tobacco. So he sat in his bed, made this biddy, having a smoke, just generally chatting. And then the superintendent of CJ3 came marching in with his lackeys. And of course, I shouldn't have been there. It was as simple as that. So I hid under the bed. And as it turned out, the superintendent, he walked up. Bob was the only guy there, Englishman, if you like, foreigner. So he come up to have a chat to him to see how things were, and there's me lying under his bed, like, just looking at his feet. Anyway, eventually he goes, and I get out, and we have another smoke, and we have a good laugh about that. So that was quite funny for me, if you like. And at the same time, there was a guy called Sanjay. He wanted to have a bed. And even though we went to see the doctor of the psycho ward to say that he was stressed and had too much tension, they wouldn't do anything about it. So this guy decided to climb the water tower. Now this water tower was about 70 feet up. And he climbed up this water tower, threatening to throw himself off if they didn't give him a bed. And nobody took any notice. And unfortunately he fell off. And he fell off onto a railing that had spikes on it, and he got spiked. So they rushed him off to hospital, and he was in hospital for some time, at least a month or so. And then one day he come back, and he got his bed in the psycho ward, and this guy was so happy. Anyway, after some time of being in the psycho ward, they decided to send him back to Ward 5, which was like a mini city, to be honest. They say there were, I don't know, 1,500 people in this ward. It was a shit ward, to say the least. So he climbed the water tower again, threatening to throw himself off. Anyway, they coaxed him down, and they put him back into the psycho ward, if you like. And that's where he stayed for a long time. And when you look at it, isn't it sad? You know, that somebody will go to them lengths just to lie in a bed that we do every night. Take it for granted, don't even think about it. Yet this guy nearly died because he wanted a bed. Next time.